It's been a few days since Metroid Prime 4 has come out, and the reception surrounding the game has been evenly split between two camps at this point. You either ignore all of its problems, and you think that it's amazing because you've been waiting so long already, or you're massively disappointed and you want to hurl the game into the sun for wasting your time. If I had to guess, the majority of people seem to be going into the latter camp, because if Metroid proves anything this time, it's that fans wanted more than what they got from Nintendo this time around. You've likely seen clips online of people complaining about the desert that connects the 5 main dungeons of Prime 4's world, which feels like soulless slop meant to just pad the game in. Yeah, you would be right. But it goes deeper than that, and it makes me want to ask a question where I genuinely believe that Nintendo as a company has now proven that they are, well, kind of unable to move on from what I call the Breath of the Wild meta, and it keeps coming true, unfortunately. Let me explain. Obviously, Breath of the Wild was amazing. Even I, someone who frankly didn't care much about Zelda, played Wild and found myself immersed in its world. I found its mechanics breathtaking, no pun intended, and how actual real-world logic applied to every single thing I did in that game. I remember needing to solve a puzzle in Wild where I had electricity nodes, but I needed a way to funnel the electricity from one node to another. Without enough metal boxes around, I figured my swords and shields could work because they were, made of metal too. So I placed them on the ground as connections between the nodes, and to my amazement, the electricity flowed through the steel of my blade to the steel of my shield to the next node beside it, and then solved the puzzle. It was moments like this that made Breath of the Wild amazing to me, like being cold and pulling out a torch and now no longer being cold because it made sense. Because while sure, most open world games were just big but pretty static, Zelda felt like the developers really went that extra mile to create a truly reactive world based in actual real world logic, which is why it was amazing to play. But due to the massive success of Breath of the Wild, many of Nintendo's games have frankly taken the design philosophy of what that game did and then applied it in different ways. Sometimes it worked, like in Super Mario Odyssey taking cues from it. Many open world games since Breath of the Wild has also tried to emulate what that game has done too. I can think of Genshin Impact, Atelier Ryza, Sonic Frontiers, that's just naming a few, but all these games and more are completely beholden to the existence of Nintendo's magnum opus being there in the first place. But because of the mammoth-like success of Breath of the Wild, it feels as though Nintendo can't really escape that game's reception or really its importance. It's like this black hole. It's like the modern day Ocarina of Time or something in terms of its influence these days. But circling this back to Metroid Prime 4, the DNA of Breath of the Wild can be felt all over the game, but the difference here was that what Retro Studios did with Metroid 4 was learn all the wrong lessons from Breath of the Wild instead. And then unsuccessfully, they made a game that, while at times is a Metroid game, I guess, it not only tries to emulate its betters, but it's also being held down by, again, what I said before, peak millennial slop writing. And if you want more content analyzing games and news, consider subscribing and all of that, thank you. But again, everyone has made fun of Soul Valley and Metroid 4 already, because it really is just a big barren wasteland where it feels more like padding to a game that is barely even 15 hours long for full price, by the way, but it also adds nothing besides some crystals to break as you drive through them to shake up the monotony. Another huge problem with Metroid 4 is that the power-ups are not installed like they are in previous games automatically. In other Metroids or Metroidvanias, when you get a power, it's just immediately available to you. Double jump, maybe a tool to cling onto surfaces, a grapple hook, the ability to dive down and break the floor beneath you in, like, say, Hollow Knight. These powers are always applied immediately because that's the point of gaining a new power in a game like this. It's all about the excitement and the curiosity of what will this new power do for me in this instant? Let me play around with it. But in Metroid, for example, Prime 4 early on, you can go to an ice level, and then there's an ice wall that stops you from progressing. So you then have to go to the lava level, which is across the entire desert again, get the fire chip thing to now give you the fire blast powers, but you don't just gain the power instantly. You now have to circle back out of the fire level, load another screen, and then drive across the entire desert back to Miles, the guy with the glasses and the yellow paint armor at the home base, and now Miles then in a cutscene talks to you, and then implements that fire chip that you found in the fire cave into Samus's gun finally, so now she can use her fire ability. Then you have to travel all the way back again across the desert to the ice level that you were at. It's ridiculous again, dude, to now shoot down that ice barrier, and then you can have your Metroid experience. Again, it's not that Metroid Prime 4 4 is a bad game, but it is unfortunately a good game that is being suffocated by really bad game design and that annoying millennial slop writing where every character never seemingly shuts up. The joy of playing a Metroid game, or the entire genre that it birthed quite literally called Metroidvanias, was that these games, which does have voice acting in them of course for the most part, are games that are specifically about exploration, and this is key, discovery, over really anything else. When you play Hollow Knight, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, or say Time Spinner, Fist Forged in Shadow Torch, Ender Lilies, Guacamelee, or even Blasphemous, all of these games exist because of that benchmark that was created and actualized by Super Metroid decades ago. Which is why it's so frustrating to see a series that used to be considered the gold standard of game design now being reduced to essentially Breath of the Wild slop, meets sometimes Metroid design, but also everyone now speaks like a 343 Industries Halo character. Because again, like I said in another video, but quite a few devs who worked on Metroid Prime 4 came from 343, who obviously made Halo 4, 5, and Infinite, and yeah, it shows. Samus is very evidently Master Chief in how she's presented in this game. She's silent, she nods her head in response, she shoots things, and then all the exposition and the character dialogue and all of that is from those around her. Samus is barely a character in a game where she is again apparently some chosen one in a prophecy for like the second, third, God knows how many times now. It's as Eurogamer said here in their article, the companions are bad, sure, but Samus is equally as pointless in this adventure because she's just a non-character. Normally this wouldn't be an issue because previous Metroid games, which still had dialogue, was nowhere near what Prime 4 has done. Well, maybe besides Other M, but nobody really likes that game too, which also proves the point. But Metroid, in case you don't know, is a really big inspiration for Dark Souls actually. Even the creators of Dark Souls admitted that. It's about playing a game where you stitch the story together yourself through environmental storytelling as you play a character in an unknown land. Dark Souls would be way worse if, say, every 5 seconds someone was just talking to your chosen undead via like psychic link or something. I don't know about you, but one thing I yearn in video games now is silence, and I mean in dialogue. Like, there is beauty in the silence. When you play a game that just doesn't need to be cutscene heavy, driven, dialogue ridden constantly, like when games are not like that, I actually want to play them more, and especially on replays. And frankly, this is a big problem with westernized games these days, which is that Western developers seem terrified to allow players to just play the game by themselves. It's like they constantly need to talk to you to distract you so that you don't notice the other problems maybe surrounding the game instead. Hey, we hope you don't notice that Soul Valley sucks, but don't worry, we're going to talk to you the entire time and fill your head with exposition instead. I guarantee you that Metroid Prime 4 would have been far better received if the more westernized millennial slop elements were just removed entirely. If the human characters were taken out and Miles especially just didn't exist, the game would be objectively better for it. If the game just removed Soul Valley and instead replaced it with a dungeon-like design where new power-ups opened up new pathways to other dungeons, like a Metroidvania, remember what those were, Nintendo? I bet you do. Way better than what it is right now. But the problem is that Metroid Prime 4 proves that Nintendo really can't move on. They seem to just be stuck in this endless loop where all they can do is remix and try to replicate Breath of the Wild again and again. It reminds me of Ubisoft in a way, where Ubisoft used to be amazing, like way back. They used to be able to be like Nintendo back in the day even, creating new concepts and game designs that actually rocked the entire landscape around them when they did Far Cry 3. That revolutionized that franchise in open world game design too, but then they never really outdid it. They instead just replicated it again and again with different settings. The same with Assassin's Creed. The last truly innovative Assassin's Creed game was Black Flag. Even all the RPG Assassin's Creed games were just The Witcher 3, but worse pretty much. Ubisoft, like Nintendo, they seem to be stuck in this endless loop somewhat, to varying degrees obviously, but they're constantly haunted by these magnum opus games they made that they're just unable to escape their gravity or something. For God's sakes, even Nintendo recently released Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, another Zelda game tied directly to, of course not, what else would it be, Breath of the Wild again and that era of Zelda games. It's like they're unable to let that era of Zelda just go because it just makes them so much money. So instead they just find new ways to keep remixing these ideas or feel to make more money from these fans who just, I guess, are nostalgic or yearn for those experiences more and more. Like they're pulling the Ubisoft is what I'm trying to say. In Metroid Prime 4, you even go down the the shrines like in Breath of the Wild. Even the dungeons, they have this like Breath of the Wild feel to them too. Everything is either Metroid as it should be at times, or then it suddenly becomes this weird Zelda Halo mixture with Western slop writing. It's a game that is, how do I put it? It's like it's fighting with itself is what I'm saying. But the thing is that there's nothing wrong with Metroid just being Metroid. Clearly people love Dread. They could have doubled down on that further. I think a Metroid game that was expansive like Dark Souls, which by definition Dark Souls level design is just 3D Metroidvania. I mean, you can try to argue that, but you'll lose because it's true, and I'm surprised that Nintendo didn't just go down that approach with Samus's latest adventure. It's like these games can be more than they are, but Nintendo, for whatever reason, is either not interested or just wants to Breath of the Wild all their IPs to varying degrees of success. But it seems that Nintendo just enjoys torturing their fans and then using them as guinea pigs to see what they can get away with. As seen here from GameSpot, Nintendo locked a radio station that allows you to listen to music in Metroid Prime 4 while you're driving behind the low price of a $30 amiibo. This amiibo of Samus also gives you protection in the game apparently, but the point of this in the first place is that without this amiibo, you can't listen to in-game music while driving Samus's bike throughout the expansive, lifeless desert that you will frequently go to. But if you just pay $30 American, you can do that now, which is insane, I know, but what's extra stupid is that people discovered that if you 100% the game, as in scan everything successfully, you will also unlock this same radio feature in the game for free. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the point? Why do you need to essentially 100% Metroid Prime 4, as in do all their content, just so that you can listen to a radio station in a game you literally just maxed out? That feature doesn't make any sense. Sure, some may say, well, now you can listen to the radio on hard mode, I guess, but it's still pretty pointless. Why would you on purpose make the initial playthrough of a game objectively worse by comparison by not allowing players to just listen to the music in-game as they play it the first time? The only reason you did that is just to incentivize them to now buy a $30 amiibo instead to circumvent this problem. But this is again another frankly very stupid issue that doesn't need to exist. It's like the slop writers. They come into these projects, they make them worse on purpose, then proceed to offer their services as the remedy of sorts to the problems that they just created. This is all I'm getting from Nintendo doing this. They know 100% it would be better with the music, but let's instead charge you $30 for a plastic amiibo because, well, you're Nintendo fans. You're probably going to apologize and run defense for your favorite company either way, let's be honest. And look, while I do think Nintendo's games are objectively good still, their practices are still bad regardless. Why do you have to pay $30 for something that should be there day one? It just reminds me of like Konami infamously charging players $10 for like a save file slot in Metal Gear Survive, and that's real, by the way. You can't normalize basic features being placed behind paywalls and think that you're somehow in the right by protecting these companies. Like, they don't care about you. Eventually somebody out there is going to paywall auto-saving your game. Or who knows, let's go a step further. Let's just make saving your game downright expensive to do. I mean, screw it. Why not pay real-life money for digital bullets in Metroid or something? Like, EA tried that already too, and that's real too, by the way. It's just that people need to stop defending these stupid practices because you're not going to make these games better in the future by shielding Nintendo or really anyone else. None of this should be in games, period. I don't care who or what it is. Paywalling basic features is always going to be moronic. And I still find it baffling that the gotcha is, just 100% the game, then you can listen to the radio. Okay, cool. If I 100% a game, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move on to a different game because I 100%ed it. Like, that's a pointless unlock now, isn't it? For example, here's a user named Joey Ferris who apparently reviews games. Here's what he said about Metroid paywalling music. Turns out you do not need the Samus and Viola amiibo to unlock music in Soul Valley. You can 100% the game to acquire it. Now let's stop spreading misinformation, shall we? You see what I mean? Joey is how these games get worse and also get away with it. Because despite his bio saying that he apparently critiques games for a living, he very clearly was just presented with objectively something that he should be critiquing in a game, but instead he runs defense for it, which then just tells me that he's biased depending on the game that he's critiquing at any given moment. So how can I now take you seriously? I can't. Hilariously though, I wanted to go and try to read the comments, and this showed up as you can see here. It looks like Joey deleted his post on defending Metroid. Well, I guess white knighting for Nintendo didn't work out as planned, did it, Joey? Well, that happens, I guess. Although this account with an appropriate name had a very nice workaround, as you can see here. You can just listen to the Metroid Prime OST via YouTube while you drive through the desert in-game, so now you don't have to spend $30 American for it. Nintendo probably saw that and they're pounding their fists right now thinking, how could they find a way around us asking for more money? Crazy that back in the day on like Nintendo DS, you could pick up a brand new Metroid game for like $40. Now you're paying $30 minimum for the soundtrack soundtrack alone in your new $80 Metroid game. Bleak time, fellas. Bleak indeed. Awful even. It's actually $90 in Canada, by the way. For the Switch 2 version anyways. But this is what confuses me, okay, about Prime 4. You see, Metroid Dread sold the best out of the more recent games in this series, and that game was unapologetically a Metroid game and kept to the series' roots. Yet here with Prime 4, with the added bonus of having the hype from Dread to now use as a springboard, they then decided it was better to abandon what made Metroid cool to chase objectively worse game design in a Western sense instead. But now what you're left with is 5 dungeons placed far away from one another with power-ups you need to backtrack for via a bike to install first. Yes, Metroidvania games were always about backtracking, but it was far more about unlocking a cool power. Then traversing the map looking for secrets to find what you can do with that new power. But what they've done here instead is remove that backtracking in a fun sense and then replace it with hold down button and drive mindlessly. Imagine if in like Hollow Knight, every time you got a power up, you had to return to the beginning of the game to now make it work, I guess. Then you have to go back to where you found that power up to then open the door that was beside the power up with the power up you just got. You would be confused and obviously irritated. Or how about this, okay? Let's look at it this way, alright? Let's say that in Hollow Knight you had Mantis Village, the Royal Waterways, Ancient Basin, Kingdom's Edge, and all the other areas in the game as their own dungeons, okay? But now instead, between all of these levels in Hollow Knight, you didn't have the intricate level design and secrets that were connecting all of these areas to one another. But now instead, you had one big empty map that was a straight line where you just held forward in between each level until you reached Ancient Basin or Crystal Peak. Everyone would hate Hollow Knight if they did that. Yet that's what they did with Metroid here. It's inexcusable and it should be rightfully criticized. It's lazy Western slop design at its finest. It is the Ubisoftification, if you will, of the Nintendo formula. It's like when Ubisoft tried to wow people and say, look at our new Ghost Recon game. You can drive for kilometers at a time between missions and there's nothing there. Like, that's cool, but the better question is, why? Why would you think that's a good idea to do in the first place if, like you said, there's nothing between where you are and where you're going but like just trees and road? Most players will just grab a helicopter or whatever's fastest to just avoid all of that to get to their next mission as fast as possible. In my opinion, if your game has players mashing buttons to fast travel all the time instead of engaging with the actual content and world that you created, it's probably because your game is not fun to travel through to warrant them repeating levels. Which is, by design, by the core of the franchise, that is what Metroid is supposed to be about. It was never about having millennial slop writers screaming in your ears 24/7 over the radio while you drive mindlessly for 5 minutes to the next Metroid area. It was about finding things out on your own, getting the power-ups, discovering, oh hey, that path I went by earlier I can probably open with this new power-up. And then going there, trying, and then discovering something cool that helps you. Like, that's the whole point of these games. But no, everything has to now be like Breath of the Wild now. So we gotta make the maps impossibly big. So you can, what now, spend minutes at a time doing nothing because Breath of the Wild, I guess, did that to a degree and people liked it, so why wouldn't it work here? Not realizing that in Zelda, the openness worked because of the logic and physics of that world, like I said before. Besides connecting electricity with metal weapons, you could in Zelda also see a river and be like, oh, I can't cross that. But then you think, all right, I can maybe freeze the water so now I can jump over it or slide, or you can cut down a tree, roll it into the lake so that it catches on the rocks, and voila, now you can cross no problem. But Breath of the Wild smartfully gives you all the powers you also need at the beginning of the game. Whereas if Breath had the design of Prime 4, every time you would get a new power, you'd have to go back to some village or temple and have some guy install it for you. But Nintendo back then knew that was bad game design, so they didn't do that. So why would they let Metroid do that? It puzzles me to this day. It's just objectively poor game design. Then you have Kiwi Talks. That's a YouTuber who interviews game developers. Anyways, he spoke about Metroid Prime 4 and his connection to Retro Studios, which goes back a way. But as you can see here from this very small snippet of what he said, he's worried and disappointed by the reception to Prime 4 by players. I'll paraphrase what he's saying in the rest of his post, because again, it's very long and I don't want to read it all for you. But basically, Kiwi believes that the reason why Metroid Prime 4 became what it was is because of a single reason: game sales. His argument is that every Metroid game sales numbers have effectively plateaued outside of Dreads. So the developers and Nintendo likely wanted to take the safe approach game design wise to ensure this game sold like other AAA Western games instead. So the reason why the game is very hand-holdy designed, tons of dialogue from NPCs telling you where to go and more, is because this, in Retro Studios' design philosophy, is what modern gamers look for in games these days. So they ditched the unique design of Metroid on purpose to make it more homogenized, if you will, so that people will maybe who aren't Metroid fans would look at this and go, oh, it's sort of like Halo. I know what Halo is, and then they'll maybe buy it. But that's not what Metroid fans want, which means Nintendo misled this game from the very beginning, and it's likely why the game was in development, you know what, for a really long time, like so long, dude, 8 years. And it also helps because, again, Kiwi Talks knows Retro very well, and he said as seen here to a comment that Metroid Prime 4 was actually a very expensive game to make by Nintendo standards, and that Retro Studios is one of Nintendo's more expensive studios in general when it comes to making games too, which is bizarre to me because the games they've made for Nintendo sell nothing compared to their cheaper ran studios in Japan, for example, by comparison. The be-all end-all here is that the people who decided what to do and how to make this Metroid game were effectively terrified of making Metroid too much like Metroid anymore. So they, with that Halo 4, 5, and Infinite DNA from the developers who worked on this, essentially, they just went, you know what, we're gonna make Halo 7 pretty much, but we're gonna swap Chief with Samus and just hope that nobody notices. As Kiwi Talk says here, he believes the reason why Metroid has in a sense simplified or dumbed itself down is because Nintendo is no longer interested in the older audience that Metroid has inhabited for decades. He even claims that his niece and nephews dropped Metroid when he bought it for them because it was just too complicated to understand. Yet they, by comparison, beat both Zelda Breath and Tears because it was more palpable and understandable to them. Maybe that's why it is what it is now. It's hand-holding, requires less brain power because Nintendo wants this geared towards kids. But either way, it's not working for the legacy players, it seems, at all because they didn't get what was advertised to them 8 years ago. But that's essentially what this game is now. They've lost the plot with the open-endedness of the map and the slop millennial writing because Nintendo wants to make everything into some version of Breath of the Wild if they can, because hey, if it worked for Zelda, why can't it work for Metroid or really any other property we own? But the point is that these other franchises are not Zelda. Metroid should always be intricate level design, the same way that Super Mario needs to have pitch-perfect platforming, or Pokemon is about capturing small creatures from their families with no explanation, leaving like a family of Pidgeys now grieving for years because they don't know where their baby Pidgey boy went because some kid needed to fill his Pokedex. That was a long explanation to say, people just want the franchises that they like to be recognizable as the franchises they got into in the beginning. If they don't, then it's pointless, really. And it doesn't surprise me that, again, when people from 343 Industries are working on a legacy series that they, again, did not create in the first place, they have also, again, missed the entire point, just like they did with Halo with 3 whole games. With the peak millennial slop writing, the pointless open world, and the hand-holding nature of it all, Nintendo just missed here big time, okay? And it shows how people are reacting to it. They need to stop thinking everything should be Breath of the Wild when it's so evidently clear that not everything can be Breath of the Wild. And this will only continue to ruin their franchises and other games too if they just continue down this route. Metroid can have its Zelda moment, but it needs to be Metroid, not Halo 7 actually edition, you know what I mean? But what do you think? Has Nintendo relied too heavily on the Zelda magic to make them, I guess, make money or whatever lately? Are they Ubisofting their franchises a bit too much? Let me know. As always, thanks for watching, subscribe, I'll see you next time. Hopefully one day we can get a Metroid game that is made by one of Nintendo's legacy studios in Japan again. But until then, this doesn't feel like Metroid's Prime anymore, it just kind of feels sad and directionless.